Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Please Watch This, where two film-loving mates with gaps in their viewing history recommend films to one another so they can once and for all answer that question, who has better taste? Very excited this week to talk about one of my favourite films. I'm Sam Blakely. I'm joined as always by Hugh Dempsey. Hugh, how are you?
Hello, hi Sam, I'm alright, thank you, how are you?
I feel great. We are going to talk about one of my favourite films. I'm sat here with a bottle of water, a cup of tea and a bottle of beer. I'm like a dog with three dicks.
Right, well, I mean, let's see if we can plug some oil derricks for you then, if mixing metaphors.
No, you nailed it first time. So, Hugh, the film we're looking at today is There Will Be Blood. You'd never seen it before. I'd seen it. I love it. Is there a reason why you'd never seen it before?
As I said to you, if you remember from last week's conversation, from last episode, I had seen the first maybe 15 or 20 minutes of the film, and then had, for whatever reason, stopped watching it and then never got back to it.
Was it something to do with the fact that there was literally zero dialogue in that?
I think it had something to do with it, and I remember, and at this point I did make a note. I think it's about 14 minutes without any dialogue.
That's right. In fact, there is one word uttered, though it wasn't scripted. Do you know what the word was?
I mean, we're not on the quiz part yet, so I think I'll keep my powder dry. No, I don't. Is it when they're in the silver and gold office?
No.
Oh.
It's actually when Daniel falls and breaks his leg. He says no.
Ah. Right.
So yeah, that bit of trivia to kick us off into the stratosphere. For new listeners, the way the show works is one of us, the host in this case, has seen a film, they loved it, the other person feels guilty for never having seen it. And we both watch it, we talk, till the cows come home about it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen any cows outside my house recently when we've been talking about films, but I assume they're making their journeys within the length of time.
Ninja cows. Ninja cows, that's what
Japanese cows, yeah. Yeah.
We're on shaky ground already. This is a new record 2 minutes in.
I mean, what? You just assume, don't you? No, I'm only joking.
I'm also another reason why I'm excited, Hugh. This is our 10th episode. We've made it to double figures. Most podcasts don't go past episode 7.
Right. Well, let's hope we make it to episode 11.
Well, you've jinxed it now.
Yeah. Oh, that's awkward. I was enjoying doing this. Oh well.
Oh well.
Well, listeners, this is our last episode.
It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Go out strong.
Yeah. So Sam, why don't you start us off and tell us what you like about this film and why you would recommend it to me, and ultimately why you think I would like it.
Well, this film, as we mentioned last week, is by my favourite director of all time, Paul Thomas Anderson. Still haven't seen some of his films, but I'm saving them up, etc. Look at last week's episode for more information on why I've not seen all the films by my favourite director.
Look at a thing that you hear with your ears. That's important.
Yeah, do that. Do that. It's great. It's a very Paul Thomas Anderson film, but it's also a real evolution from his previous films. The film we watched last week, Boogie Nights, has a lot of similarities, sort of cinematically and so on, but actually this is almost like a darker, more grown-up version, and the films between Boogie Nights and this kind of show that development as well. What I really love about this film is I really like sitting there watching something kind of not necessarily wash over me, but watching something living in a character portrait and just thinking all the way through a film and wanting to talk about it and wanting to share it with people. And I think Paul Thomas Anderson does that better than anybody else. When I watch his films, I really want to get other people to be watching the film at the same time.
Yeah, so you can have that dialogue about what's happening. You think there's an element in his filmmaking that asks more questions than it answers, would you say?
Yeah, it's not handed on a platter. It's kind of, there might be one line in the whole film that's kind of the point of the film, and if you missed it, then you miss out a little bit. And so this film, I should just very briefly describe the plot for anybody who's not seen it, or if you've not seen it for a while.
Always important.
We've got Daniel Plainview. He's a very ambitious oil prospector.
That's Daniel Day-Lewis's character.
And it's essentially his journey over the course of about 20 or 30 years, whereby he becomes rich, becomes very successful as an oil baron, I suppose you'd call it, and then he has an ongoing duel with a local priest. Is he a priest? What is he? Is a pastor?
Pastor is more.
Pastor
would be more, because I think, well, he's a Protestant, not a Protestant. They don't really have Protestants in North America, do they? How would you describe it? So he's a religious pastor of this small Californian town, but he's
That's
not.
right.
But he's not. You wouldn't say he's not ordained by any sort of authority. He kind of is just this sort of, not wild would be the wrong word, but
charismatic.
Yeah, unlicensed would be a great way to describe it. Well, he is, isn't he? Because he's too young to have been to any sort of religious education other than kind of what he learnt himself or what he'd been told by previous religious people within this small, not this small area, but this sparsely populated area.
And he puts on a show. Daniel kind of tell that to him. So just crack on with the synopsis. So he kind of has this ongoing feud with him, and we basically see the life of Daniel Plainview for 30 years, where he becomes rich, very successful, makes loads of money, and basically sort of retires to become a ghost in a big house. And it's like almost all Paul Thomas Anderson films. It's not about that plot. It's really a character study. It's really a character portrait.
I would argue that
it's about themes.
Sorry, I would argue that it's more of a snapshot of his life for about a year in between 1911 and 1912, and then it's kind of bookended by the beginning of the film in, I think, is it 1898, and then the very end, is it 26 or 27? I think it is.
27, yeah. 27.
No,
yeah, absolutely, you're right. It's predominantly about one particular year where he strikes it particularly well. And it's really hard to describe film plot-wise, but in other ways very easy to describe.
What would you say the themes are?
The themes, there's some very obvious religious themes. It's kind of a battle between Daniel Plainview, who is not religious, but he will use religion to his benefit. So religion's a big theme. In some ways, ambition, capitalism is a huge theme. He's kind of chasing money at the expense of everything. He adopts a co-worker's young infant child, but basically adopts him as a token, as a business tool to try to get some contracts. And he's in search of money, but not for the sake of the money. Actually, he says, "What will I do if you make me a millionaire? What will I do next?" It's about money. It's about religion. In some ways, it's about masculinity as well. He's a very sort of old-fashioned masculine.
I felt watching it that it's about power as well, like power that people can hold over certain individuals, and the way they can hold on to assets, or they can promise wealth through sort of assets that they hold.
Whereby he doesn't really have any power over people except that he has the resources to make that. When he goes to see old man Sunday at the Sunday farm, and offers him a price for his land, the old man's not into bargaining. He's the sort of weaker of the two, even though he has something that Daniel wants. And there's a really great thing. I watched a fascinating interview, Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Thomas Anderson being interviewed by Charlie Rose in America, and he says, this is a man who's spent basically all his adult life in caves or down mines on his own, essentially, and yet he's got to cultivate this silver-tongued salesman persona, and it's the first lines in the film actually are him selling, trying to get a contract from a local area that struck oil, and he's so convincing. It's impossible not to talk about this film without talking about that voice, without talking about his manner, and really how he gets across his wares, really, and tries to sell himself to the people.
Yeah. Okay, so what do you like specifically about the film?
I really like in some ways, ambiguity. What I really like, actually, and this has become very apparent in the last 20 years in American TV shows, is the anti-hero. The first time I ever heard the word anti-hero was doing A-level English literature, and it was used when we were reading about Dracula, who's this anti-hero because he's this magnetic villain who you actually really like because he's charismatic and strong, but who's a villain. And that's exactly what Daniel Plainview is, and you can see many different places. Dracula was an inspiration for Daniel Plainview.
Okay.
There's some really clear visual nods as well, actually, to that. The Gothic mansion that he ends up in. There's one shot in particular. So when he is awoken by Bandy after he's shot his supposed brother, he agrees to come to the church and be baptised, and he stands up and he puts his coat on and he looks over his shoulder, and it is the Dracula pose. It's, big collar, he's looking to the side, kind of a proud nose. It really struck me because it was the second time I watched it this week. I watched it the first time, did some research, found out about the Dracula inspiration, and saw that, and I thought, oh my god, that is like Paul Thomas Anderson going, by the way, this is Dracula.
Yeah, he's sucking, instead of sucking the blood out of people, he's sucking the mineral wealth out of people.
Yeah, well, that's another thing. Yeah, the oil is clearly blood in so many different places in so many different ways, and there's a religious sort of importance attached to the oil. When they first strike oil, one of his co-workers sort of puts basically like a cross of oil on his son's head, HW's head.
Does, yeah.
And that's quite clear. But the Dracula thing, it's just so good because what's so fascinating about Dracula and a lot of novels at the time, I think basically Darwin discovers the theory of natural selection, and then you have this wealth of science and literature that's based on that. You have things like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde that are really looking at that duality of man. They're sort of fighting with this prospect that we can be, human and animal. And Dracula is one of those. Dracula is a really urbane gentleman that's around the town. He's very charming, very, just very charming, very charismatic. But he's an animal, and he wants to kill. That's kind of like there's some sexual imagery there as well, and that really is captured in this.
Yeah. Yeah, although that's something I noticed on watching this that's kind of missing from this film. That there's no real sexuality to the film, so to speak. There's no women. Yeah, not really. No.
He's an asexual character in many ways. I mean, Eli Sunday does talk about him. I can't remember the word he uses, but cavorting with women, or he's lusting after women, and you don't see that at all. He's not a man who's tempted by anything. He's not tempted by friendship because he hates people. He's not tempted by women. He seems contemptuous at best, about the prospect of other people.
So why would you think I would like this film then?
I think you would like it. I mean, you really like Boogie Nights.
I do.
So I know that you're not the sort of person who's put off by a vaguely meandering character portrait that's, over 2 hours long.
No, not at all. I mean, the more meandering, the longer sometimes the better for me, I find that.
Yeah. And I know that you appreciate good cinematography. I know you appreciate a good score. We should talk about the soundtrack, actually. I don't know if you know about the controversy surrounding the soundtrack.
No, I don't. I think we'll go on then. Explain.
Do you know who did the score?
Yeah, it's a guy called Johnny Greenwood.
Yes.
What British.
Else? Do you know his favorite? Yes, and lead guitarist of Radiohead.
Yeah, I thought I recognised him when I quickly looked him up.
It's good for me. Radiohead are my favourite band, and that's a big plus for me. He's gone on. He also scored The Master, and probably another film by Paul Thomas Anderson. This was his first ever film score.
No.
That's
the Phantom Thread. He did the Phantom Thread as well.
Phantom Thread, yeah. Done that. So he, in my eyes, would have been nailed on for the Oscar, and he would have gotten some nominations. However, it was disqualified because he didn't write all of the pieces specifically for the film. He kind of adapted and used some pieces that he already had.
What? That's a bit dodgy, isn't it? I mean, I get it by the letter of the law that it's not original for this film, but that's shaky ground, isn't it? Did they change anything afterwards? I mean, I was unaware of this, but surely. Oh, by the way, I've got a famous guitarist from one of the biggest bands in the world. Of course, he's going to have a bit of spare music lying around that he's going to use.
Yeah. Oh, in fact, he worked with Paul Thomas Anderson again recently. Well, actually, Radiohead worked with Paul Thomas Anderson again recently. There's a 15-minute or so long, short, sort of long music video on Netflix called Anime.
Right. Okay. I might check it out.
I believe that's how you pronounce it. It's good. It's it doesn't make any sense. It's sort of dreamlike and it's absurd, but
Classic Radiohead.
it's really good. Yeah, exactly. It's Radiohead. It's Paul Thomas Anderson. I'm going to say P.T. Anderson from now. It's too many syllables. Things I think you might not like about it.
Oh.
I don't know. I don't know what you wouldn't like about it. I think for a lot of people, it can get boring if they're in the wrong mood. But I don't think you're that sort of person. If you caught it in the wrong mood, maybe you'd find it boring after a time. But I'd struggle to think of many things that you would find problematic about it.
Okay.
So yeah, I look forward to hearing your view. After the break, we'll find out what Hugh thinks. Welcome back. We're going to find out what Hugh thinks of There Will Be Blood. Hugh, did you like There Will Be Blood? I'm crossing my fingers.
Right, so I'm going to be brutally honest with you.
Oh, for God's sake. It's another The Shining.
Yeah. I didn't enjoy it as much. I didn't like it as much as I thought I was going to.
Oh, dear. Talk to me.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. It's not that I dislike the film. I don't sit there and go, this is a bad film. I just was left feeling like I'm going to do, because we're doing a double Paul Anderson back-to-back double header, I wasn't left feeling, oh wow, I've really watched an interesting slice of life there. I've really watched this amazing piece of cinema and this great character study. And right, let's put it this way. The ambitions for this film are lofty. The cinematography, the character, the setting, they're all they're up there. They're so high and up there looking down at the cinema. Like I appreciate the technical side of this film. Like again, I do the cinematographer, whose name I don't know, but the cinematography won best cinematography at the Oscars for this film in 2008 when it was presented. So you can see that in this film. The film just left me feeling a little cold. I'll be honest with you. Where Boogie Nights, you felt going, oh, that was interesting. Oh, that's something that could have happened with this. I agree with you that it is clearly the progression of a filmmaker's craft as he goes along through the years. So you can see that Boogie Nights is, hey, here's a fun film about people having a fun time, and then here's some of the bad sides of that lifestyle that they chose to pursue. Here, whilst I agree with you that the ambiguity of the characters and their decision making is intentional, I found that there was points in the film where it didn't make the decisions sometimes that Daniel Plainview makes don't make sense, and they're very random, and I would have preferred if there was a bit, maybe it's me, but I felt like I would have needed more explanation to some of the actions that the character chooses to take.
Have you got any in mind?
Yeah, so the one, okay, look, it sets up the dramatic tension of the film, which is basically his quarrel with Paul Dano's character, Eli. First of all, can I just say, as caveat to this is, I didn't realise for about 50 minutes that Eli and Paul, his brother at the beginning of the film, who come to see Daniel, and Kieran Hines' character Fletcher at the beginning, were two separate characters.
Right,
It only dawned on me when he beats his father up after he gets beaten up by Plainview.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, I thought it was the same character. I thought when he gets to the farm, I just thought, oh, Eli was just being a bit within himself because he didn't want to give too much away. And then
maybe he was he was acting in front of his dad.
And know that he was kind of acting in front of Fletcher and Daniel. So I thought, oh, it's the same character, but he's got back before Plainview's managed to get up there. And I was like, why all the deceit? Why are they pretending like they've never met? And then I just thought, oh, they're just doing that because now Eli's basically, this is what I'm actually like. It didn't even dawn on me that he probably says his name's Paul to Fletcher and Plainview at the beginning, and I just didn't register what his name was. So it was only when he introduced himself the second time.
Originally, on casting, Paul Dano was only going to play Paul.
Yeah.
and they actually fired or replaced the person who was due to play Eli because they basically wanted more Paul Dano, and
Yeah.
and they sort of felt like he was wasted as Paul. It does add a free song because when he goes and he sees Eli, there's a raise of the eyebrow kind of. Really, you didn't tell me you were twins. I can
Yeah.
see why you think that. One of the things I'm realizing doing this podcast is it's so important to watch a film twice, because something like that is so obvious to somebody who's seen it lots of times. And when you realize it, you go, oh well, obviously. And when you watch it again, you go, oh, he says I'm Paul. He mentions his brother Eli. When he gets to the farm, Eli's there, and he does mention Paul. But you're right. I mean, watching a film first time actually is not that easy to pick up on everything, even if it's even some simple films. You can get lost. So that's fair enough.
Like what you were saying there about so I've read that fact as well. To be fair, IMDb is great for stuff like this.
Oh yeah.
Once you know it, and then when I think back on it, it's like, oh well, yeah, that's quite obvious. Like, I mean, Paul Dano's great in this film. Don't get me wrong. He has a powerful performance. He really sells the turn of the century shyster, huckster sort of charlatan Bible basher, so to speak. If I'm allowed to say that. He does,
because you only see the shysterness sort of behind his eyes. It's never that he's on camera doing something atrocious or against. He's just a bit too pious.
Too earnest.
You see his shysterness through Daniel because what's the phrase? Don't bullshit a bullshitter. He's like, no, I'm the snake oil salesman in this town.
Yeah. And so like that scene when the first thing is, okay, I know he doesn't want to he can see that this character's trying to involve himself in his work, and Plainview can see that. But the decision not to let him bless the derrick just doesn't make sense. Just do it. Just be like, look, because he's such a driven character, you're like, why are you setting up conflict that could interrupt your oil business?
Well, I think what you said earlier was interesting about it being power. I think it's because Eli comes to him saying, and then you can say my name. He's sort of throwing down that gauntlet, say my name kind of thing. And in that moment, actually, Daniel's got the upper hand, hasn't he? And he knows he can stick the knife in. And
but why? But what? Okay, power. But this is a character whose only determination is to be an oil man, is to become a millionaire off it. If that's his only motivation, why is he messing around? He could have solved his own problem by going, okay, here's Eli, and if he wanted to show a bit of power, he could have just not done the introduction. Do you know that kind of...
I think he'd still be ceding power. He would be making the opening about Eli. And I think it's interesting. One of the reasons why 10 years, 12 years on, Daniel Plainview is still such an interesting character is because he is one-dimensional in his ambition, but he has a couple of moments. There's a really influential book in screenwriting called Save the Cat that I'm sure you might have heard of.
Yeah.
A lot of our listeners might have heard of as well. Blake Snyder.
Okay.
And he's basically written a manual on how to write a screenplay to sell.
Yeah.
And the reasons why it's called the Save the Cat is because you've got to show your hero saving a cat at the start in order to get the viewer to like him. You've got to make him do something good to get him to like them. So, at the start of Inside Llewellyn Davis, I know I said Llewellyn Bowen, he literally saves a cat. In Hellboy, he literally saves a cat. There's all kinds of films where they do something good. In this, I suppose not necessarily. I suppose like a save the cat moment is at the opening of the derrick. The girl goes past. What's her name now? I've forgotten. The young girl Sunday, and he grabs her and he says, "No more beatings, okay? No more beatings," knowing that her father is sat across the table from him. Yeah. It's this weird thing. It's his complete disdain towards religion and that religious zealotry that means that you beat your daughter for not praying.
Yeah,
it's that. But it's also a positive character moment. He's actually doing something really good for that little girl.
Yeah, and that sets up the ambiguity of this character. Do you know what I mean? And then I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it's one of those. Well, do you want me to like this character as a filmmaker? Do you want me to like this character? Do you want me to sympathise with him? What emotions are you trying to convey with this character? Because obviously, by the end of it, he's a murderer, and you don't sympathise with the character, and he alienates his son. You can see that. I mean, I'll be honest, another thing I don't like about this film is the time jump is too big. I mean, they go from 1911 to 1926, and everyone looks about a year older. I mean,
Well,
Paul
apart from
Dano-
HW.
Yeah, but obviously that's a different actor. But that's the point.
Yeah.
I can see why, on paper, that makes sense, that decision, because that is a good scene in isolation. But all I was sat watching was, it's a good scene on its own, but it's a bit of a weird scene as well, because it comes after basically Plainview gets his son basically tells him to piss off essentially and doesn't want anything to do with it. He wants to get so far away from his son that he's moving to Mexico to try and find oil to work outdoors. And yeah, the tone is a bit off there.
I think you're making some valid points, but I think this might be one of those things where if you watch this in 2 years' time, it all clicks into place and it does follow.
Look, I'm always open-minded when it comes to watching. Look, this film is a good film in regards. Like I said, the cinematography is great. The performances by Deneau and Daniel Day-Lewis are amazing. I can't deny that. Do you know what I mean? They both are acting out of their skins in this film. It was worth it just to watch those two's performances in this film. Like, I wish I'd seen it earlier just to enjoy that. But then I also do have this thing. I really like Daniel Day-Lewis. I always have. He's a cut. I think I said last week he's a cut above everyone else when it comes to acting. But there's also a point when it's a film when he is the main character of a film. Sometimes he kind of am I watching the film or am I just watching the actor? And if you've seen Lincoln, which I don't wish on anyone, quite honestly, I watched that film and I was like, oh, I've just watched a film for the last nearly 3 hours. And it's just Daniel Day-Lewis doing a really good impression of what he thinks Abraham Lincoln was like. And when Day-Lewis doesn't have the material to work from, which he does in this, he can come across as self-indulgent. Where in this, he's not self-indulgent, but I feel like the rest of the film is self-indulgent.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because he is in every single scene in this film apart from two.
Yeah.
Do you know either of the two scenes that he's
Yes,
not in?
so he's not in the one with when Eli speaks to his father and basically beats his father up.
Yeah.
And the other scene he's not in, I can't recall.
It's about 10 seconds long. It's HW getting married.
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, there's barely any, I don't think there's even any dialogue in that scene.
Yeah, it's just let's just show they get married.
Yeah.
And I think that can come across as, like, say, maybe indulgent or like you're just watching a performance. And really, it's something so strange when it's such a good performance and the camera's on him so much. And as we know from Paul Thomas Anderson, can be on a long tracking shot or a long shot. It can feel like this is acting. We're watching somebody be great at acting, regardless of what the film is. But I think, as you said, actually, that the material does justify that. Okay,
well, I don't agree with that. I don't think the story's compelling enough to make you sit down and watch it once. I'd watch this film again to see if my opinion changed. Like you said, maybe in a couple of years. But yeah, I don't. Actually, do you know what? I didn't enjoy it, Sam. I really thought I was going to enjoy it. I actually am sat here genuinely shocked at
I mean, that is the measure, isn't it? It's did you enjoy it? It's not could you write an essay saying why it's good. I do think it's something to watch again. But one of the reasons is because with a film like this, something can seem so inert, so insignificant, but actually is the main thing. So, for example, when he's sat on the beach with his sort of brother, and he's talking about, we can, what does he say? We could get liquored up and go to the dance, and it's just the first time that he seems to be this giddy adolescent, and then his expression changes and he walks into the sea. It's something like that. You go, boom! That hits you right in the gut. And I think for me, I really loved it when I first watched it, but I loved it 10 times more when I watched it again this week.
Yeah.
Because that was there, and I do think you might still find it leaves you cold when you watch it again. But
It's not.
yeah, for me, it really hit me.
It left me cold. It left me. I kept questioning the character's decisions because they set out quite like you said. He kind of does save the cat at the beginning because he ends up injuring himself, breaking his leg and dragging himself all the way to the town, and he doesn't die in that instance. Obviously, it would have been a strange film if he had died in that instance. But you kind of admire the determination of the character. He's like, oh my god, he's in a rough situation here, but actually he makes the best of it. And
to compound that, he then adopts HW, which looks fantastic. He's on the train with HW, and they're just playing, and he's feeding him his bottle, putting a bit of whiskey on that. That is quite beautiful until he says, this is my partner, my son and my partner HW, and you go, oh, what's this? Where's this going? How is he using HW in this context? And then obviously,
again, I think he cares for HW. I think that's the thing they show that the film spends its time trying, or people have said, oh well, he doesn't really care about HW. Like, okay, yeah, the bit on the train is harrowing, I must admit. Like,
yeah.
Again, strange character motivations. He could have just said, look, I can't look after you here anymore. I'm really sorry, but I don't know what to do with a deaf child. I'm going to send you to a school where they can educate you. I mean, who's going to argue with that? Who's going to be
that's the point. That's the point, isn't it? That that's one of the questions actually I wrote down to ask you. Do you think he ever loved him? Because there are times when he clearly seems to. Let's say when the derrick sets on fire, when there's pluming and HW's lost his hearing, he's being very paternal. He's really nurturing him, and then I'll be right back. And then it's actually gone pitch black. It's so dark, and he's still watching the fire. And Fletcher says to him, is HW okay? No, he's not going to be okay.
Yeah.
And he doesn't move from the spot. Fletcher is the one who goes and cares for him. And then when he loses his hearing, it just becomes a hindrance to him trying to get this pipeline. So I'm still a bit unsure. I think there's a strange bit of mercy in the final scene with HW. He's almost. I didn't think I'd bring up Harry and the Hendersons. Have you seen Harry and the Hendersons?
Oh gosh, the TV show about the Bigfoot that lives with that family in America somewhere. I used to watch it when I was a very small child, but I don't remember any of it.
It's one of those things that you almost think, did I dream that? There's a bit where John Lithgow's character knows that
it's John Lithgow, isn't he?
Yeah, exactly. The 90s were odd. Where he's shooing Harry away. He knows that it's not good for him to stay there, so he's saying, "Get out of here!" and throws rocks at him to make sure he leaves.
Yeah.
In my mind, sometimes when I watch this film, I think that's what Daniel's doing to HW when he calls him a bastard in a basket and shouting after him. In one way, I feel like he's saying, okay, I'm telling you, there's none of me in you. You can go and enjoy your life.
But then again, the way I read that was, oh well, I would have loved to have seen all the reasons why his son doesn't like his father anymore. Because his son just basically says, "Look, I'm going away to Mexico." You don't see any of the. Okay, you can see an embryonic sort of nascent. Right, here is I left my son. You left me to. You didn't tell me you were going away. You left me, and that was really awful. And then you brought me back. But he brings him back. If he hadn't brought him back, then I'd be like, yeah, I can see why you don't like your father. You don't really know him. You don't spend any time with him. He was just using you to get oil money, but he brought him back out of guilt. So, I mean,
he brought him back when the pipeline was done.
Yeah, okay, maybe this is me being a simplistic reader of a film and saying, look, I have been presented here with a nuanced character, and I am in turmoil, and therefore my turmoil has turned out to be that I don't like this film because I am trying to. I'm wanting to do one of two things, either despise or sympathise, and I can't do that here. Maybe it's me, but I don't.
I'll choose to believe that. I'll take that.
Yeah. However, that said, and that is a good thing, because sometimes in art you need to question your audience. You can't spoon feed them everything. Where in this, I am brought down on the side of your character doesn't explain himself at all, even based on the morality of the time that he's meant to be set in. So when his fake brother turns up. Spoiler alert. He.
Did I mention that at the start? We are going to spoil this film.
Yeah, if you haven't realised by now. Although there's only literally that is the only spoiler in this film, I think. And
it's not. That's the great
sex.
thing. It's not a plot where there's a mystery and then they're going to try and solve it. It's really just it's an experiential film. Not to sound too wanky, but sorry, his brother.
Yeah, so his brother, when his brother turns up, he asks him about what he's done before he basically ended up in California, and Daniel Plainview basically just says, "Oh, I was working out in the mountains somewhere, but I didn't like that. That's all I have to say about that. I'm not going to explain myself." And there, in one bit of dialogue, he's cut off any inquiry into this character other than what he says to him. Then, I mean, okay, in that same scene, you also have a bit where he says, "Oh, I've competition in me. I want no one else to succeed, and I hate people." So that's the character's motivation. Well, why didn't you say this an hour ago? Why is it now that we're finding out this is the true colours of the character?
Well, this is the beauty and the significance of that scene, and this again might be something that kind of didn't totally click on first viewing. That this for Daniel is the first time he's ever really felt a connection and being able to confide in anybody. It's in that scene that he's I don't know how long I can deal with these people, because he's silver-tongued to everybody. He manipulates HW, he manipulates his potential clients, he manipulates everybody, his workers and so on. And this is the first time that he's really opening up about, I'm not this great paternal figure, I'm not this selfless figure, I don't like people, I want people to fail, I've got this competition in me. Did it make sense when he shot him for you?
No, I've got this down here as well. I've put that killing Henry in brackets questionable, so I'm not sure how I feel about that.
So again, for me, that made no sense when I first watched it. I thought that's really harsh. Just send him on his way. It's basically him deleting his internet browsing history. He's shared something with him. He's this thing that he's been repressing, and he's been It's been a shame for him this whole time, and he's not like this with anybody else. He's opened up to this man. It's like when Paul first goes there and says, "Can I have some money? Here's where you can go." And he says to Paul, "If I go there and I find you're lying to me, I'll be coming back for more than my money." It's that he's opened up so much to his brother, to Henry, and now that he finds out he's not his brother, he's going to take more than those secrets back.
Yeah,
that's his only way of hiding his shame, literally burying his shame.
Yeah, I think the character's very proud. He doesn't like humiliation. He's very human in that sense. I think this is a good time to get into favourite scenes and favourite lines, because we kind of go straight into that territory. So, because I'm not a fan of this film. I think that's important to say. It just left me feeling cold, and it doesn't. I'm not going to go back and watch it anytime soon. Is the honest truth. Like where Boogie Nights, if that's on TV in a year or two from now, and I sit down and it's halfway through, I'll sit and watch it. It's Boogie Nights is one of those films where with this, if it's on TV in a year or two, I'll probably change the channel. If I'm being honest.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm just setting a notation in my calendar 2 years from now to arrange a Saturday night movie with you. I won't tell you it's this one. I'll get a couple of beers in and I'll just put it on and I'll say, look, you're going to enjoy this film. No, I completely... so favourite scenes. What was your favourite scene?
I can't choose... No, I'm being very difficult this week, but I can't choose between the the gas explosion at the beginning. I think that's a great scene, quite frankly. I think there is a lot of good in this film. I think maybe I just don't like the way it's put together. Maybe that's... Yeah, I mean, that is...
What we talked about last week with PTAs, he is very cinematic.
Yeah.
And that is the most, this is a film scene of the whole thing, really, isn't it? And that's where, That's where the cinematographer Robert Elswit really comes into his own and earns his money.
Cinematographers, so and the music does a lot of heavy lifting in this film as well, and where like in Star Wars, for instance, I think the music complements what you see on screen 90% of the time. It sets the scene. With this, sometimes the music does work, and it works in this scene. There's some great percussion in this scene. That is quite.
It's very Radiohead as well.
Now when you hit,
very Radiohead.
But like the opening shot, you have this really loud Lucas-style THX sound advert. At the beginning, where you have these large, horns go off, and it's just some mountains, and you just the music's really poor in certain not chosen. It's poor in certain parts.
Do you know how he made that sound? Do you know how they did that?
No.
He's Johnny Greenwood, fascinating interview on BBC Radio. He said that basically he got the whole orchestra to just play a wall of sound, and the variation just comes from human error. People can't play like a wall of sound like a computer, like a machine. All the different sort of changes in tone and volume is just them messing up, in a very human way. It's not perfect. I know what you mean. It feels discordant, or it feels overbearing.
It's striking.
It's striking. For me, it really got me into the mindset.
I think at certain points it's used so well, and I think there's no sound, is there, in the end scene when he kills Eli? I think there's no sound at all. No sound. There's no music in that scene at all. I think that's a really wise choice, and this is what
it would feel dramatic. It would feel forced.
Yeah, where that would have been a scene. Maybe you should have had some music in it. Maybe not at the very end, but I think there could have been some music in that bit.
When he kills Eli?
Yeah, I think maybe.
I don't know. It would feel like it would feel less real. I think it's because it's so brutal. It's such a horrible, brutal way to die that it would just feel like a.
But then it does such heavy lifting. Sorry, but it does heavy lifting in other parts where he's just walking around and there's this big loud music going off, and you're like,
but when you're battering somebody with a bowling pin, you don't need the music to do anything.
But in other films that I know you like, the score is integral to a lot of the action that you enjoy. So how come in this film that it's okay to have no non-diegetic music, and then in other films it's fine to do that? I mean, and a film that has set itself. Sorry, but it's a film that's sorry to interrupt. It's a film that set its stall out with a lot of music. We're gonna, like you said, a wall of sound. So I would have thought at the crescendo of the film, because that's what I think they use it great in that derrick scene when they hit the gas. You've got the tension of the oil well burning down. How are they going to deal with it? Why didn't they have something like that with the tension for this scene, where it's building up? When Eli's going, I'm a false prophet and religion is a superstition. Why didn't it have the gripping music there? That's poor director choice, in my opinion. Now, quite honestly,
I mean, I see your point. I know that a lot of films would do that. Like you say, rising tension, a big crescendo when he's hit. But too, I'd be fascinated to hear that. I'd love to see that scene with that kind of music to compare. For me, I think it's because it's such a lonely, hollow old house, and he's sort of a ghost there that. I really liked it because again it's just brutal. It's like in the Bourne films when you hear the punches, and it really you really hear it. You don't need like a striking chord to do that. I think all I can do is tell you that I loved it without the music, but I would love to hear it with just to compare.
I found it strange that a film that uses its music so well and uses it to convey a lot of the plot and a lot of the atmosphere of the scene would then choose not to use it. I mean, sometimes they say, well, it's strikingly different to the rest of the film to make a point. Here's a big wall of sound, as we said, and then here's an important bit. But I think. But
it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon for films.
No, not at all.
When a major character is shot, everything goes silent. You can't hear anybody speaking. There's no sound at all, because it's not needed, and I think maybe that was the thinking behind it.
Yeah.
I guess it's horses for courses. People
My
have
other,
different views in it.
Another great scene is in the church when he's being baptized.
Yeah.
That is powerful.
Do you think there's a crack in his armour there? Because he's only been told to say, "I've abandoned my child." It's when he says, "I've abandoned my boy." He's almost feeling it there, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
But then, when he's done, he goes, "Right, let's get the pipeline done."
Yeah, I think, does he say I've abandoned my boy before he says, let's get this over with, or something like that? He says something
he's
along
like,
those lines.
"I've abandoned my child. Lord, let's get through this and let me leave, Lord." Yeah, I've abandoned my boy.
Yeah, and, knowing Daniel Day-Lewis, he probably told Paul Dano to smack him as hard as he could.
Yeah, you've got to imagine those slaps are real, because why fake it?
Yeah, especially the bit where that I mentioned earlier, when he's at the, when he beats up Eli, and he probably hits him for real there as well.
Yeah.
But then I just didn't understand that scene. Like, he had agreed to give the church $5,000. He had agreed to that. So he would have just saved himself a load of bother giving the church the money, and just be like, right, I'm done with it. And then if he came back asking for more, then you could be like, right, I'm going to beat the shit out of him.
Yeah, it did strike me as not necessarily out of character, but when I watched it, I thought I'd forgotten that it was quite violent quite quickly. One thing it reminded me of, actually, thinking about it, is in Goodfellas, when Joe Pesci's character is at the club, and the owner of the club comes up and he says, "Look, you've got to pay your tab. It's $7,000." And he just, even though Joe Pesci's in the wrong, he explodes at him. Showing me up in front of my friends. Daniel's there in front of his workers, and you're right. It did strike me as surprising, but I liked it. I felt something.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes in this film there's a lot of great scenes surrounded by mismatches in tone. Now, I'm with you. I think Paul Thomas Anderson's a good director, and the scenes that I like in this, I like them for their own merit. I just kind of wish they were in a better film. I actually like the premise as well. I like the fact that you sit and you look at or a snapshot of the life of this oil prospector who essentially is quite a terrible person. I think that's, like you said, you admire his determination, you admire his single-mindedness, his charisma, but ultimately you're like, well, I wouldn't want to be like that person, because it shows what, the film has in fact, the film does have its own moral judgments, which I'd say Boogie Nights doesn't. Is the fact that they say, yeah, well, look, if you are successful in a field, metaphorically and physically, pun intended, then you are going to be this lonely, angry, bitter person. Or is it saying that this was, even if he wasn't successful, he was always going to be this way? Now, for me, the more interesting thing is then how did Plainview become like this? Because you basically see him when he's about, I think Daniel Day-Lewis was basically 49 when he made this film, so he's in his late 40s. But let's say, movie stars age better than the rest of us. So let's say the character's about 38, 39 when you first meet him. He's in his late 30s, right? Let's just give him the benefit of the doubt. So by the time you see him in 1911, he's, 45, nearly 50-ish? He's about the same. He's a few years younger than Daniel Day-Lewis in real life, I think would be a fair assessment.
I think so.
Yeah. So you get this character who he's already bitter and twisted because he's nearly 50. Do you know what I mean? He's already become who he is before any of the work that he ends up going into doing.
Are you suggesting we need an origin story?
Look,
there will be blood in the distant future.
There wasn't. Yeah.
Eventually, there will be blood.
Yeah. Oil. Call it oil.
Yeah.
And then make
the
it
sequel
entirely
is There Was Blood.
Yeah. Although that'd be a fascinating sequel to see how that character deals with being in prison. I'd watch that. Watch the shit out of that, because he has a singular. But he does. He has a singular aim, and his aim at that point will be to survive prison. I also think that the time jump's too big in this film. I mean, as I said earlier, it's clearly a man who he doesn't look. Again, Hollywood actors don't age them like everyone else.
I agree with that
he's
in
meant
the
to be in
sense
his
that
mid-60s there, and he just
in
I don't
the
buy
face
it.
he looks the same. They're giving him a bit grey. But I would like to point your attention to a film that came out only a few years after the final Harry Potter. When they added 20 years, that looked awful. So
Yeah, that's
really,
harrowing, isn't it, that
I
bit?
prefer him to wear a cardigan, walk around like he's completely screwed up, like his his spine's bent and his knees completely gone, and put a bit of grey on him and completely unshaven. I'd rather that, where he's just this sort of drunken mess,
I
without
think
it distracting.
it's really hard to make somebody older than what they are. It's interesting
Yeah,
that there's a physicality that comes with aging that you can't replicate. You just can't.
exactly. And there was a practicality issue of you have to have HW be a grown man who's married with some career.
Yeah.
So you have to set it, 15 years later.
Now, if the film had done a better job at setting that up, if there'd been one or two scenes, maybe 10 years later or 7 or 8 years later, and then another one a couple of years after that, and then you had the scene where Eli comes to see him and tell him about the farm, I would have found that eminently more viable and more fascinating, because you would have seen. I just never bought into it that this was 15 years later.
But again, maybe that could be a first viewing thing, because the significance really is that it's foreshadowed by his conversation with Tilford, who wants to buy everything from him, give him $1 million. He says, "We'll make you a millionaire," while you're sitting here from 1 minute to the next. And Daniel says, "What else would I do with myself?" The point is that we're jumping to what he did with himself, and that was buy a mansion, live in it like some sort of ghost, and be an alcoholic, and a waste. And I think it might have diluted that to just show his progression to that. Actually, I think just from that line, really, for me, it makes sense that we just see what he's like as a lonely old man with nobody.
Yeah, and it is interesting. Don't get me wrong. I think it comes down to his motivation. I'm still not sure what his motivation is, because if his motivation was to become rich, then he would have taken the deal from Telford. But then his motivation was to make his own money, or was his motivation to make it on his own, to be successful by his own hand, rather than getting other people to give it to him?
I don't think he's doing it to be rich. It is power. He wants to be the most powerful. It's like somebody who's worth $20 billion. I don't know why they don't all retire, but they keep going. There are those people who just. I mean, if I made £100 million, there's no way that I'd keep working. I'd do things that I wanted, like I might write more, or I might just travel. But there are those people who, even if there was no money in it, they would still play that game. He likes the game, I think. I think
he likes the oil game. You think that's his?
Well, it's not even oil, really, because he's not even an oil prospector at first. He wants to be the king. He wants to be the champion, and what else? He's not someone who's gonna go live on a beach. He wants to. He says, if I ever saw that mansion, that big house again from our hometown, I think I'd be sick. He actually wants to just be the Billy Big Bollocks.
Okay, okay, moving on. So, what was your favourite scene then?
What I noted down was anytime he and Eli have their 2 or 3 big confrontations, I think the baptism scene was right up there for me. I really like the final scene. It was the one that, after the film came out, was most quoted. I drink your milkshake. But I thought it was just really good. But in terms of the significance for that character, I think it's probably going to be him and his brother going out, having a bonfire, camping, because it's such a really intimate insight into him really speaking to somebody for the first time. And so my favourite line actually linked to that was, "I have competition in me. I want no one else to succeed. I hate most people." And it really, when I watched it again, that was the one that stood out as the most significant scene.
Yeah, because that's the bit that has character in it. You actually see some character, because you can't identify it, because it doesn't have there's no narration in this. He doesn't narrate what he's doing, so you've got to deride deride's not the right word. You've got to divine what the character's motivations are by his actions and his words.
Yeah.
Which is interesting, because asking the audience to figure that out for themselves. But yeah, I'm left disappointed with this one. I'm genuinely disappointed. I was sat. When you watch something, and someone's built it up for you, and then you watch it, and then you're like, oh no, they're not going to be happy when you tell them that I don't like this, because it's like, oh, I don't want to spoil other people's fun.
But it could make for one of our most interesting episodes because it's not that much fun just hearing a couple of guys going, I liked this. Oh, yeah, me too. This is why I liked it. Oh, yeah, me too. Yeah. I think it might be our most interesting episode since Empire Strikes Back on
Maybe.
On that front.
Although, with this one, I will... Sorry, go on.
Sorry.
No, after you.
It's given me a certain amount of hope because I feel like a lot of the things you have, problems you have with it, I do think would be solved by watching it again in a year or two.
Maybe. We'll see. Maybe we should go back to it. Yeah, make a note.
Episode 300.
Yeah, we can have a look and see if I've changed my mind. You know me. I'm quite open to changing my mind about things when it comes to films.
I'll do you a deal. In I don't know, let's say a year or two's time, I'll rewatch Empire Strikes Back. We'll talk about that, and you rewatch There Will Be Blood.
I'll quite happily rewatch There Will Be Blood, but I think with Empire, I don't think you'll ever like it because it's a kids' film.
Yeah, you said it.
Well, that's why you don't like it, and I think the more I ruminated on it, and the more because I had a feeling when we watched it that you'd be like, "Oh, I can see why everyone likes it, but it's not for me." And then I didn't expect the vitriol that's come out of your mouth in the last 3 months since you watched it.
I have got more and more vitriolic. I think when I first watched the episode, I said, "Oh, I don't really like it. It's really silly." Every episode since, I've been like that awfulness.
Yeah. And with this, I'm not taking. With this, I think I'm disappointed rather than disliking.
Yeah, you wanted to like it.
Yeah, and because and it's been out for 12 years now, so I was aware of it. And I'd come across it in other bits and pieces. I've seen scenes from it. I think I'd seen bits of the baptism scene before over the years, and bits of the bowling alley scene. But I just was I was hoping that those scenes were, because sometimes in isolation, when you see part of a scene of a film that you want to watch, you're like, oh well, that'll make sense in context. And in this, they did make a little bit of sense, but it was everything else around it that was a bit off for me. Okay, well, shall we have a break? Come back, do the Critics Corner and the quiz. So
after the break, we're going to have Critics Corner. We're going to find out Hugh's rating, and we'll have our quiz. Welcome back. Let's hear what the critics said. In fact, there's only one critic for us, Hugh. Who's that critic?
Was he still alive when this came out?
He was.
What year did not Roger Ebert. What year did Roger Ebert die? I thought he was dead by 2007.
No, I don't think so. I'm Googling it as we speak.
Was it 2012?
2013 actually. So he had a good 5 years left actually.
So So what did Big Rog? Come on. What did the Ebertster say about There Will Be Blood? I'm guessing he liked it.
He liked it, but he didn't love it. He gave it 3.5 out of 5. What we love about Roger Ebert, I think I can speak for us both, is that he's almost always right, and he's florid turn of phrase.
Yeah, he's a great writer, isn't he?
Clearly, what I'm basically going to... I'm going to
film critics ever.
Exactly, and I'm just going to read out a couple of his paragraphs because I don't want to paraphrase.
Go on.
So he says, the voice of the oil man sounds made of oil, gristle and syrup. It's deep and reassuring, absolutely sure of itself, and curiously fraudulent. No man who sounds this forthright can be other than a liar. His name is Daniel Plainview, and he must have been given the name to himself as a private joke. For little that he does, as it seems. In Paul Thomas Anderson's brutal, driving epic There Will Be Blood, he begins by trying to wrest, well, I won't say what, from the earth with a pick and shovel, and ends by extracting countless barrels of oil, whose wealth he keeps all for himself. Daniel Day-Lewis makes him a great oversized monster, who hates all men, including therefore himself. And he says, watching the movie is like viewing a natural disaster that you cannot turn away from. By that I do not mean that the movie is bad, any more than it is good. It is a force beyond categories. It has scenes of terror and poignancy, scenes of ruthless chicanery, scenes awesome for their scope, moments echoing with whispers, and an ending that in some peculiar way. this material demands, because it could not conclude on an appropriate note. There has been nothing appropriate about it. Those who hate the ending, and there may be many, might be asked to dictate a better one. Something bittersweet, perhaps, grandly tragic. Only madness can supply a termination for this story. And he goes on to say that it's the kind of film that is easily called great. I'm not sure of its greatness. It was filmed in the same area of Texas used by No Country for Old Men, and that is a great film, and a perfect one. But There Will Be Blood is not perfect, and in its imperfections, we may see its reach exceeding its grasp, which is not a dishonourable thing.
Do you know what? I avoided looking at the critics this week because I wanted to give my own view of it raw and without being anchored by better writers and better critics. Quite frankly, I wanted to see, because I know that from when I looked at the critics and I looked at Ebert's review last week with Boogie Nights, I found that I used some of the things that he said and was like, oh yeah, I agree with that. And I can use that. But I knew this week if I kind of said what critics said about it, I knew I'd end up kind of maybe regurgitating some of their thoughts on the film.
It's so easily done, isn't it? Mark Kermode says, part of his job is to tell you why you didn't like a film that you thought you did. And I'll often decide what I feel about a film after I've heard what he says about it. So it's clear Roger Ebert he appreciated a lot of it but didn't think it was great. I think maybe you share that view, roughly.
Yeah, I was. A lot of the things he said about it, I felt, he's rung quite true there. Did you get any critics who liked it immeasurably or disliked it with intensity?
No, I went for the one. I like either having somebody who hated it and somebody who loved it, or somebody who both. So yeah, I really liked that, and obviously he's speaking contemporary to the film. What I want to know, Hugh, is your rating. Roger's given it 3.5 out of 5. Hugh, how many bastards in a basket out of 10?
So I'd give it 5 Moseses.
5 out of 10? Blimey.
Yeah, at the moment. Yeah, I'd give it 5 out of 10. Not to steal other podcasts' IP here, but I'm going to for a second. If you've ever listened to Little White Lies podcast, Truth in Movies, they do like a 3-tiered rating system. And
yes.
I think they basically do how many out of 5 were you anticipating a film, and then what did you think of the film at the time, and then what did you think after it. So with this, my anticipation for it was 5 out of 5. I was really looking forward to watching this, especially after watching Boogie Nights the week before. I think I finished editing Boogie Nights and then basically put this straight on afterwards. I was like, right, I've done that, put that out, I'm going to watch this, and then I was looking for, and then I was left I was left disappointed. And then straight after it, I was conflicted because I knew that it wasn't going to be a 10 out of 10 review for myself. I knew that I was going to have this difficult, awkward conversation with you about it. And I've had a few days to reflect on it, and I still kind of hold that opinion. Seems
fair. I mean, you've justified it as much as I don't agree, and I can understand maybe the reasons behind it. I think you've laid out a good justification. Would you recommend the film?
No.
Is there anybody that you would recommend it to?
I think Ben would like it.
Right? Yeah, he loves it.
Who's been on our previous? Yeah, I think he does. Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me.
Are you ready for a quiz?
I am exceptionally
fantastic.
Ready for a quiz.
All right. Well, in that case, let's do a quiz. Guess how many questions I've got for you, Hugh?
I don't know. With you, probably about 59 because you can't stick to a five quiz.
I narrowed it down to 7.
Again, 7. So what is this the pattern now? You do 7,
yeah,
I do 5.
I'm just 40% more, so it's fine.
You're just 40%.
Here's
more.
a quiz. Quiz question number 1. How many people does Daniel murder?
Ooh. Well, I would say 2. Can't be more than 2. I mean, he can be. I mean, by health and safety standards, he may be held, responsible in this day and age for the death of HW's father by corporate manslaughter, but back then I don't think they had such a
One of the
term,
notes
so,
I made was,
I would
thank
say.
God for health and safety, because bloody hell. It's so nice. Yeah. Question 2. What is the final line of the film?
Final line of the film is, I'm done.
Almost. I'm finished. It's like a child.
Yeah, I'm finished.
Good.
Yeah.
Question 3. How much does Daniel pay Paul Sunday for giving him the information about the land to drill? There's 2 figures here.
Oh, there's 2 figures. I thought it was $500.
$500 at first. How much does he tell Eli that he paid Paul?
Oh, I don't remember.
He then told...
I didn't realise this was a 2-part quiz. So there's 8 questions.
There's a sort of 8 or 10 or whatever.
I don't remember.
He says I paid him $10,000 right there and then.
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, he lies to him, doesn't he?
3 of the next 4...
I think that was the bit I realised that it was 2 separate characters. Although, how bad do you feel for the guy who was originally cast as Eli?
Pretty bad.
I mean, don't get me wrong, I might not have enjoyed this film as much as I wanted to, but there's no denying Paul Dano.
He's not Paul Danan. Yeah, Paul Dano.
Yeah. Isn't there a famous, Z-list celebrity in this country also called Paul
Danan? Yeah, he was on Hollyoaks and then Celebrity Love Island and so on. Horrible man. Paul...
I, for a while, confused those two.
It's easily done. For me, Paul Dano, I did not like him because I didn't like his character in Little Miss Sunshine, and I didn't like his character here because he's sort of he's a bit whiny. I really only properly appreciated how good he is and actually liked him in the film Swiss Army Man, which we are going to do in a future episode.
Well, we're not, because we've both
Bollocks. When did you see it?
A couple of years ago.
Listeners, watch Swiss Army Man. It's really good. Question number 4. I think you'll know this. In what year does the film begin?
18.
Very good. Question number 5. In what year does the film end?
1927.
Very good. I've put 1927 at least.
Yeah.
Question 6.
Well, it states it, doesn't it?
It states it for the wedding, and then we assume that he's basically gone from the wedding to his dad. But anyway, Question 6. This is a tricky one, actually. By what derisory name does Daniel refer to HW's interpreter?
Oh, nips.
Says your little dog. Woof 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 woof. Refers to him as his little dog.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Question 7, possibly the easiest of the lot, actually. What is Daniel originally mining for?
Gold. Well, gold and silver.
He's going for silver, and then he sells it to the gold and silver company or whatever. So you did really well on the quiz. I think you basically got them all right. What's that?
Can you remember how much he? He sells the silver to them for?
I was going to ask you that actually, and then I forgot to write it down. Did you know?
I think it was $423.
That's pretty good.
Because I knew it might come up on the quiz, so I was like, I should try and memorise that. I know it was 420 something.
So you've done well on the quiz. We've wrapped up There Will Be Blood. I'm disappointed that you didn't love it, but I'm still hopeful that you will one day.
We've stopped... Yeah, perhaps.
So Hugh, what are we going to watch next week?
So next week, we're going to change the tone slightly and look at another director's sort of way that they look at, a director with a clear voice and a clear style. We're going to look at the Taika Waititi film Hunt for the Wilder People, starring Sam Neill and the kid from Deadpool 2, if you've seen that. He's also in that. Let me see what his name was. It is, because I've forgotten, Julian Dennison, apparently. But yeah, that's it's a good film. It's good fun. Yeah, I think hopefully you'll enjoy it. And also it ties in with the fact that Taika Waititi's recently just released a film called Jojo Rabbit.
Well, don't tell the listeners our marketing strategy. They were just going to drop it when Taika Waititi's hot. Don't let them behind the curtain on that.
I mean, I mean, that's usually a good way you market things, is to tie it in with things that have come out recently.
Subtly.
So they go,
subtly.
I wonder what else this
Anyway, I don't know anything about Hunt for the Wilder People at all.
Subtlety
I've
here.
don't know anything about it. I think I've seen the poster. Looks kind of wacky, comedy. It's Taika Waititi, so it's going to be funny, hopefully. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Yeah, it should be good fun. Okay then. Well, we'll see.
We will. Hugh, if our listeners want to get in touch and complain about you, how can they do it?
Well, so if they want to get in touch with us via an electronic mail, they can do. They can do that at pleasewatchthis.pod@gmail.com.
Oh, I was hoping for some sort of metaphor joke. You've let me down.
I mean, I could have done one, but if I do them every week,
they're less special.
Yeah, they've got to really come to themselves.
I think this film's just not inspired you. That's what it must be. So, tell me the email address again.
It's pleasewatchthis.pod@gmail.com.
If you want to get in touch with us on Twitter, you can. It might be useful to know that we are at Please Watch Pod. If you want to find us on Facebook, we have a page called Please Watch This, which you can also find by typing in at Please Watch Pod. We do. Oh, we've got correspondence. We had some correspondence. Somebody calling themselves Safroni or Saffron really wants us to watch 50 Shades of Grey, and I don't want to. So
Was
we're not
this
going to.
a real? Is this a real email? Because again, behind the curtain, I thought that might have been somebody you knew messing.
Somehow I let this person around my child. So Saffron, I hate to say it, but we're not going to watch 50 Shades of Grey.
Is that? I thought it was your lass, to be honest. I thought she'd picked a really strange. By the way, for those non-Yorkshire listeners, your lass means your girlfriend. Or
in this case, fiancée.
In this part of the
yeah.
world.
No, she hasn't chosen a weird film, but she's chosen a weird friend who wants us to watch a weird film. Sorry, Saffron, we're not going to watch it.
Okay, apologies. I've actually seen it.
So have I.
So, have you
seen
it?
So there we go. I really wanted to watch it with you,
Saffron.
but ruined. Sorry, Saffron. There's two other films, though. Have you seen the other two?
I've seen bits of the third one.
Maybe when we run out of films. We're not gonna. Thanks, guys.
I mean, I'm 31 now. I mean, statistically, I'll only live another 40 years. So, I mean, yeah, I don't think there's enough time to get around to it.
There's only so many weeks in a life.
Too many. Exactly. There's only so many good films you can watch, but
that's not one of them. Cool. Yeah. Well, we've more than outstayed our welcome, Hugh. It's been fun chatting to you, even though I feel like our friendship is forever jeopardised.
Well, I mean, if it's not over by now after you insulted Empire and I disliked this, I mean, yeah, maybe this is the last episode.
We made it to the big 1-0. Listeners, thank you for your patronage. We love you. We will talk to you next week.
Bye.
Bye.